What does it mean to be wounded, to be scarred, branded, or amputated? What message is inscribed on the body when it is subject to these atrocities? In my project, I examine such questions in the context of post-Civil War Sierra Leone, my homeland. I argue that the amputated body is constructed around an ambivalence, and that through a complex reformulation of amputation, the residual limb is recast as a form of transcendence rather than limitation. So as victims reconcile themselves with the past, they undercut the master discourse of domination that the victimizer attempts permanently to inscribe upon their bodies.
You really need to know what the war and even the pre-war and post-war situation will be like for Sierra Leone. If you really look at the war itself, it was basically provoked by many factors, both internal and external. Foremost among many of these the issue of bad governance and also the neglect of young people.
It all started in 1991. It was January of 1991 when Sierra Leoneans were woken up to a very strange voice over the BBC. I believe it was on the 11th of January 1991 when this voice came over the BBC saying the current regime is given 90 days to abdicate. Otherwise, they will march through the country to the capital and seize power. The government by then, as many Sierra Leoneans, didn't pay that much attention to what was said. We thought this was a hoax or something, or even if it's something of a reality, it could be contained. And the government gave us lots of assurances as to why we need not worry. But then, after the 90 days, it became clear with the first attack at the east of the country that this is something that's going to explode if it's not properly managed. But I would say right from that point, the government was in denial. And so within the next months or year, we saw regular progress of the rebels across the country. And for every section of the country that was attacked, lots of people were killed, arson, lots of damage, tremendous destruction.
One has to be cognizant of why the war, so that we don't head down that same path that brought us to the place where, anarchy, because it was not a civil war, how people know civil war. It was anarchy. It was a breakdown of the rule of law. It really was, and a complete and utter and total breakdown of the rule of law. And then there was, the Liberia forces and blah, blah, blah. But that rule of law is something that I know Sierra Leoneans like. Sierra Leoneans like law. They want law and order. They don't want anarchy. That's very clear. And so in knowing that that happened, and it happened under the APC, which is now the government in power again, one has to remember those historical things in terms of moving forward.
The war has ended, and we're talking here about issues of reconciliation. So much atrocities have been committed. It's a question of going back to class with somebody whom I've witnessed committing all kinds of atrocities to my family. It's a question of staying in the same place with my neighbor who raped my sister. It's a question of going back to the same workplace with my co-worker who amputated my younger brother. So there are all kinds of dynamics there. So how do we come together as a community, look at the past, engage with that past, and try to make sense of what the future holds for us? It's not going to be easy. It's not something we can wish away. It's not something we can gloss over. Certainly it's not something we can sweep under the carpet. Given the fact that we want to reconcile, we want to move forward, we want to go ahead. But in going forward, I'm not sure that the right way is to gloss over realities. I think when we face the realities, when we rise up to the challenges and transcend them, it makes more sense that we are on the path of or towards achieving a more holistic and harmonious society than to just say, you know what, let everything come to an end. We are one people, we're fine, it has been done, let's just forgive and forget and pretend everything is all right. I'm not sure. Because within a very short time, you begin to see that there are cracks in that kind of arrangement. And if we don't handle that kind of situation, it may explode and lead to more complicating, and perhaps, but hopefully not, disastrous circumstances.
So there are a lot of post-war realities that we have to grapple with. Sierra Leone. And if we don't understand the kind of situation we find ourselves now in this country, we will not be able to solve those problems. Now, after the war, there ensued a mad rush for people to acquire wealth and build houses, open businesses and so on. People actually were more grabbing than even before. They became even greedier than before. So they started looting the treasury of this country. It is what I have described as the Tower of Babel scenario. You know, after the flood, then the Israelites started building the tower so that should there be another flood, they would have somewhere to hide. People want to guard themselves against another war. If it comes, I should be able to fly out of the country. Because that was what happened. During the war, a lot of the rich people who had amassed wealth in this country were able to fly out of this country with their families. So people are guarding themselves now. They are preparing in case there is another war. We should be the ones flying with our own family out of the country. Another problem that I see personally from my own opinion is the leadership problem we have. Well, what do I mean by leadership? Not that we don't have somebody occupying the seat, but is the person providing the kind of leadership that we need in a post-war situation. You see, after the war, a lot of people became traumatized. There is inbuilt violence that has not actually externalized itself. There's that inbuilt violence which sometimes pops out through violent language, infighting in offices, even violent attacks out there in the streets. For me, that was just a symptom of something in this country. So we need a leader who understands the people of this country. We need a leader who understands and can manage this kind of situation. Otherwise, what prevailed before the war would prevail and there will be another war.
I realized that the war itself has left a lot of scar, a lot of trauma, bodily, spiritually, on Sierra Leoneans. I think it's not only a question of damage to infrastructure, it's also a question of damage to the psyche of Sierra Leoneans.
All this is because of corruption. The Anti-Corruption Commission has been able to recover 788 million leones from corrupt individuals in this country. You want to know the kind of corruption people that involved? Contracts, fake contracts, People ask for kickbacks, the bribery, the rate of bribery, the police, NRA, all of these institutions are corrupt. And all of these guys working in these institutions are filthy rich. They are filthy rich. Again, like I said, it's a post-war reality.
I've always been concerned about my country. For one, the nature of the war, the extent, the dimension it took, is something I'm still trying to make sense of. And I say to myself, had I not witnessed, the atrocities myself, I would never have believed that Sierra Leoneans or human beings, in fact, do have the capacity to sink to the depth of bestiality, I'll call it, to the level which we saw it play out in my country. I look at people who were amputated, probably double amputated. I looked at young women who were abducted, taken to the forest, gang raped for months, years. Some never came back. Some came back at advanced stages of pregnancy. They've given birth to babies that reminds them of the trauma that they went through. The combatants themselves, some of them were children, kids, who were drugged and forced to commit all kinds of atrocities. I'll never forget one amputee I interviewed in the Chueka, a double amputee, an old man. He told me a story. He was coming from work and he ran into the rebels. And by virtue of the fact that he had his uniform on, they said to him, "Why are you going to work? It seems as if you are in support of the current regime, when in fact you should be supporting us that are trying to liberate you. So which means you are a sellout, you are a traitor. But it's because you have hands, that's why you can go to work. So we're going to take both hands. We're going to chop off both hands. When we do that, then you can no longer go to work." And so this man was sitting right there and he was telling me his story, almost as if it happened to him yesterday.
Like this is suffering. I'm telling you, this war is senseless war. These people came here for war. We would have expecting them to go to the ministers and the president, but they came for the public
people.
Eh? They burnt my house. I was in Kisi, they burned my house. They killed my son, who have finished college already now. Another college, junior. Fine boy. They shot him before my veranda. To the meeting. I'm a church in England. Can't go to Colombia. How they can go, how they do time. Pastor Mackenzie and a church with India.
Regardless of the difficulty, you know, at some point I said to myself, maybe I need to rethink my research method, in the sense that here are people who, for the past probably 7, 8 years, they've been trying to forget what happened to them. And they've made a conscious effort, you know, not to remember. There is a lot of issues in that, because forgetting itself has to do with suppression of realities. And when we deliberately suppress or repress, it has its consequences. It could manifest itself in different ways, through different outlets, in which could be dangerous. And so, on one level, you want to believe there is need for people to talk, to break the silence. Talking itself has a therapeutic function, because when you talk, you achieve some level of spiritual and emotional release. At the same time, in talking, you are in the position of control. It is your own story. You are reshaping it. You can reconfigure it. You can recontextualize it. It gives you some sense of being in control. And that takes away a good part of the sense of helplessness, of loss of hope, of being a victim that plays into all this notion of being an amputee. My project will examine the ambivalence of the amputated body as a site that amplifies notions of power, control, and domination in the master discourse, while, and perhaps more importantly, it denies, it challenges, subverts, and transcends established notions of domination contained in that discourse. This approach to rereading and narrating the amputated body provides a complex reformulation of amputation. It is based on irony, on narratology and coping strategies that recast the amputated stump as a kind of anathema that is directed towards the victimizer and not the victimized. And so through this discourse of resistance, history and memory return to haunt the perpetrator, while the victim, through the process of self-liberation and humanization, is empowered. My project here is not so much to get victims to remember, but rather, in the process of remembering, how do we transcend the limitations, the challenges, the stigma, the shame, the humiliation that came about out of rape and out of amputation. If I come with a machete and cut off both hands of an individual, I am sending a very clear message to that individual. And I want that message to be inscripted on the body. Because the body then, given the fact that amputation is permanent, whatever message I inscribe on that body is inscribed permanently until the individual dies, so to speak. And the individual has to live with that message and to confront that message forever. And so that message can be internalized by the individual and force him or her into a role of the victimized, the helpless, the hopeless. I do not want amputees to see themselves or rape victims to see themselves in that light of hopelessness and helplessness. Given the fact that this has happened to them, and this is the identity or what the victimizer hopes to achieve by amputation or rape, how can we turn that paradigm against the victimizer. It's like the amputee saying, I now understand why you chopped off my hands, because you're demonstrating that you have the power to do that. Not only that, you want me to internalize a message of hopelessness, of domination for the rest of my life. But now that I know that this is your intention, how do I reverse that paradigm? How do I use that to fight back against you? How do I transcend the limitations of my body? I may not have both hands, but what can I do in my present circumstance to liberate myself and then work against the pleasure that you hope to derive from my situation? In the summer of 2010, I went home to continue my research, and I encountered the single leg amputee sports club that illustrates my concept of transcendence.
We consider ourselves as peace ambassadors. In 2003, we went with 20 amputee players to England and played with the national amputee team there in England. In 2005, we went to Brazil in the World Cup, and we did so much there. And 2006, we were in Russia. 2008, we were in Turkey. And 2007, we organized the first ever amputee tournament in Sierra Leone, African Nations Cup. And so we have been doing a lot of promotions. 2 weeks ago, we went to Spain, and we did a lot of promotions, peace promotions there in Spain. So we have, I mean, they are very, very proud that they are contributing to peace development in nations.
Whoa, whoa, whoa! Whoa, 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 whoa! Go, go, go!
As they meet together, you know, they all live in different locations. But every week they are coming together, they are sharing fellowship. I mean, they are cracking jokes, and you know, and so it's very, very important for them. Even though government so appreciate what we are doing, they give us a total moral support, but we are still struggling with finances to implement our program. So we are appealing to international world to see how they could help our football programs, to expand our programs, and also to help the guys after the football. You know, some of them want to even maybe engage into job skills training programs, educational facilities. So this football programs is also catering for their educational aspects. So we are appealing for support.
Out of this discourse, I've put together a learning module that I've titled Violence, Trauma and Recovery. I'm going to use the Sierra Leone projects as tool for education, vocation and social transformation at Hope College. This learning module will be divided into 5 sections with fact sheets, audio and visual aids, content materials, and learning activities and evaluation in each section. These sections will draw from psychology, where it will explore theoretical approaches to violence and trauma, history having to do with the causes of the Civil War, sociology, the land and its people, social work, policies for social justice and recovery, as well as religion, where we will explore theological and biblical principles of forgiveness and reconciliation.